Hey there, A's Day fans. Welcome to our Tuesday edition of our show. I'm your host, Joe Grata. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to hearing our thoughts on everything athletics baseball. Hope each and every one of you had a restful weekend and your weeks are off to a productive start. Today is Tuesday, December 16th. We got a good show for you. Recently in the news, Ketel Marte shared 5 teams on his no trade clause list that he will have the opportunity to exercise his full 10-5 rights at the start of the 2026 season. So that is part of the reason why Arizona may be aggressively shopping him before the season begins. He shared his 5 teams, and unfortunately, the A's landed on that list. So we'll discuss what that means and where they may pivot at the second base market. And speaking of, we're also going to take a look at some areas of need that they still need to address. Where do they go from here? A flurry of moves have been completed around the league, and yet the A's have made a move for their bullpen amongst additionally a flurry of minor league transactions. You got to wonder what is in store for the A's to improve the club for 2026. And then before we get on out of here, we're going to take a dive into our focus of the art of plate discipline, like we mentioned at the end of last episode. So the bright spot of this club is the offense. And while they were highly productive, an area of improvement would be their discipline at the plate. I would like to see them have more of a focus of an increase in their walk percentage and the decrease in their K percentage. We'll take a look at a couple of case studies side by side to discuss the importance of an improvement in this area and how the A's can implement this in 2026 and beyond. Holy Toledo, let's go A's. All right there, A's Day fans. Thank you so much for tuning in to our Tuesday edition of our show. Before we get into our topics of discussion today, want to give us all a nice friendly reminder of where you can find us along with our podcast episodes that are released twice per week on wherever you like to listen to your favorite podcasts, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify Music, iHeartRadio, Podbean. There's so many more global platforms. Wherever you can listen to a podcast, you could be sure to be able to listen to A's Day as well. So please continue to listen to us, download it, like it, tell your friends. We appreciate all of your continued support. Be sure to check us out on our social media channels too as well. On Instagram at A's Day Baseball Podcast, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at A's Day Baseball, and be sure to check out our YouTube channel for video editions of these podcast episodes, along with player interviews with A's players, baseball destination city guides and hotspots where we feature different attractions across the country where the A's may be participating as opponents or potentially even at their home of spring training, like the content trip that we covered this past February down in Mesa. So check out all of our content there. That is going to continue to even take off more in 2026. We're excited to be in the midst of content travel schedule where we are planning to create some wonderful exclusive content for you, the lovely audience. So be sure to continue to subscribe. Check out our YouTube channel. We appreciate your support there as well. And to become an official subscriber of A's Day, check out our Patreon site, patreon.com/A's Day for just $2 a month. You'll be entered to win A's autographed memorabilia, future A's game tickets, A's Day monthly t-shirt giveaways, and so much more as we are able to grow this platform collaboratively. All right, let's start with our first topic of discussion. Let's talk about Ketel Marte. So he has been a player that we've talked about on this platform in an earlier episode where there were reports out there initially when the Diamondbacks showed some interest in potentially shopping Marte before the 2026 season. And in that article, the A's were listed as a potential trade partner. And that must be based on the prospect and major league ready talent that the A's can assemble for the Diamondbacks that would make them a desirable trade candidate. However, it does not seem like that is going to continue on. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, shortly after the 2026 MLB season begins, Arizona Diamondbacks second baseman Ketel Marte's 10-5 rights kick in. 10 years in MLB, 5 on the same team, giving him a full no-trade clause and control of where he wants to play for the duration of his contract. That gives the Diamondbacks a time frame in which they could maximize his value if the club opts to trade arguably its most talented hitter. Marte, though, has a limited no-trade clause already, and it was reported that there are 5 teams on his list that he would not agree to a trade to be sent to. The teams were as follows: the New York Yankees, the St. Louis Cardinals, the San Francisco Giants, the Pittsburgh Pirates, and unfortunately, your A's. For whatever reasons, for each he had in the contract negotiations, these are amongst the most closely tied teams to Marte not wanting to land there in the future. You wonder if some past experiences in some of these places led to that. I'm sure from the A's point of view, he's probably looking at where the A's are currently playing in Sutter Health Park, while his offensive numbers would no doubtedly uptick in performance. An MLB veteran like that may not find Sacramento a desirable place at the moment. And so I could see why he would add the A's to this list. Some of the other teams on the list were surprising a little bit, especially the Yankees and Giants. I thought those would be a couple teams that could be a potential fit, especially San Francisco. But for whatever reason, he has no desire to play in these destinations. So there are, on the other side of this coin, teams that have been very tightly wound with Marte rumors in terms of teams that he could end up getting traded with. Teams interested, it seems like the Red Sox are the number one trade candidate at the moment. Some other teams coming in right behind them are the Tampa Bay Rays and Seattle Mariners too as well. So very interesting. I'm not terribly surprised here, even at the initial notion of when the A's were mentioned as a potential trade destination for Marte. While it was exciting at the time, especially with the A's desire to potentially upgrade second base or third base, Marte would be a significant upgrade at second base. But with the amount of teams that would be highly coveting his services and potentially being able to offer a more desirable trade package, I always thought from the start that the A's percentage chances of landing this trade were very minimal in the single digits. And this just confirms it, that if you're at home, I hope I didn't get anybody too excited by bringing this topic of discussion initially to A's Day. If so, I apologize. I just want to bring in all the news and all the rumors that are going on, especially the A's haven't been linked to a whole lot this offseason. So a big name that gets linked with the A's there. Again, I think I did a pretty good job in making sure I made it clear that this isn't something that was a done deal, that it was more a rumor, and I always thought from the start they would be punching or fighting an uphill battle. So, this does mean that Marte will be ending up either playing second base for the Diamondbacks in 2026. More likely than not, I believe that he's going to end up somewhere else. Can definitely see him being a 40 to 50 plus double guy. If he ends up with the Red Sox, that would be a great fit there. We'll have to track along and see where Marte goes, but we'll be sure to track that more on our Bases, Battles, and Ball Players podcast, where we cover all of MLB and minor league and everything baseball related. Just because Marte, in terms of from our scope, we're over and done with. It doesn't matter to A's Day and what the Athletics are going to be doing in 2026, because he is on the A's are on the team that he does not want it to be traded to list. So it was fun while it lasted, but we are moving on to other pastures. Speaking of, with this big fish in the second base market off the board via the trade for the A's, let's discuss where they can pivot in free agency and perhaps land a trade with another club. So, where do the A's go from here? So what have they done so far? They've added one guy to their bullpen in Mark Leiter Jr. recently on a 1-year, $3 million deal. I think that's great. That provides some stability at the back end of their bullpen. Not in terms of closing out games, but being that bridge to the closer, which I do think is an area the A's still need to get some work done. They are going to have candidates that are going to be vying for that spot. But at the end of the day, I do think there are enough candidates still available, even at this point where the flurry of moves have been over and done with, and including a lot of high-profile closers landing in new homes or resigning to their familiar places. But there are still some guys that I think the A's would be smart to at least have conversations with, and I think could be good fits on the 2026 club. With that, I think their position targets remain upgrading at second base or third base. I don't think they'll do both. I do feel like they feel like they have enough depth in terms of infielders, guys that are interchangeable. Examples: Max Muncy and Darryl Hernandez. I do believe whatever one of these positions that they do upgrade, the other one is going to be a positional battle between those two to be the everyday guy. So I do think having the depth in the infield is a plus to have, but I think there is room for improvement here, and I think you should go out and make a statement to add to an offense that already has been humming and make this liner even deeper and more dangerous. And if you're going to, especially in my opinion, if you're going at second base, you have an opportunity to improve defensively too as well. So we'll get into some options based on remaining free agent options that are out there at this stage in the game. And then we're going to throw out a couple of trade ideas at each, like a trade option or idea at each position, just to get our brains thinking and wonder what that would look like for the A's. Just to get a little creative too as well. So position targets, let's finish with that first. Second or third base. I do still think they need to add more depth to this bullpen. And I do know there has been a report that they are looking to add a starter. According to General Manager David Forst, it is going to be someone that falls into the realm of a more of a middle-of-the-rotation type starter. There are still a couple of top-of-the-end rotation starters still out there that we'll get into here in a few minutes. But hope that the A's take a few swings here and make some positive additions to this club that is trending in the right direction. So let's start at second base, and we'll rattle off just the best remaining free agents after some signings like a Gleyber Torres and other that of those guys are off the board. So at second base, Willie Castro, Luis Rengifo, Brendan Rodgers, Adam Frazier, Tyro Estrada, and then it kind of trickles off from there. And then trade options, I wanted to get creative here. So the A's are someone that has a good conglomerate of pitching prospects, and they do have outfield depth. So if you are going to line up with a team that may be looking for some pitching depth or even a bat that could be impactful in the outfield, then they may be able to line up with a trade partner. In this case, I don't know what type of pitching that this team may be looking for, but they are looking for arms to help bridge until they get two of their top-of-the-rotation guys back from injury. And I got a little bit of creative here too as well. Because this player, and we're just going to come out and say it, I believe that the A's and Yankees potentially can line up as a potential trade partner here. And they've been rumored to be potentially shopping Jazz Chisholm Jr. Now, that would be a rather impactful bat. At the end of the day, I think those are just rumors to get some transactions churning or get some discussions stirring, whatever the case may be. I take things all with a grain of salt because in the deepest depths of truth, I believe that Jazz is eventually going to sign a long-term deal to be a Yankee for at least the majority of the remainder of his playing career. I do think that's a great fit there. However, I think if the Yankees feel like they have some areas where they need to improve upon, if they want to add starting pitching depth, from guys maybe even organizationally that may be knocking on the door of being ready. So it would take something like, I don't know, a Braden Nett, Gage Jump, maybe even a Luis Morales type. If you include a guy like that, I know you wouldn't want to give up there. But that makes an area, that is a significant upgrade at second base. If you bring in someone like a Jazz Chisholm that's going to play pretty consistent defense at second base, in a pinch he could play third, he can even play outfield for you if you need. He steals bases. He's an all-around player that I think would even have a significant uptick in offensive performance. After coming off a 30-30 season, just imagine what he can do in Sutter Health Park. Now, I know that would be rolling the dice a bit. I don't know if those trade details that I mentioned is even something that would be realistic. But I think that would get the Yankees' attention if you include someone like a Luis Morales. Now, all of this move would have to have a trickle-down effect, however, because you are giving up an arm of the future without a doubt. Actually, a couple in this group that I think could be major pieces in your rotation. So you have to go out there and get a little bit more aggressive with your starting pitching. You have to go out there and land one of these big fish. I know I'm jumping a little bit ahead of myself, but you would have to go out there and land a Ranger Suarez or a Framber Valdez. So these moves would be all connected. I'm not saying that you give up on the future because, again, Jazz Chisholm is someone that would be here for an extended period of time. He's still in the midst of the prime of his career, so that's not the issue here. The issue here is you are taking depth away from an area of need. You would have to be proactive and supplement that and continue to add upon it. Now, at the end of the day, is it most ideal? Again, because I think the stars are, or the sky's the ceiling for someone like Morales, yes. But sometimes if you want to make an area of strength, just start jumping off the page, that's what Jazz Chisholm would add to this offense that's already humming. And like I said, there would have to be that plan in place to have that pivot ready, that you have to go out there and get, two starters. So one of them being a top-end starter and another then a middle-of-the-rotation top guy, and someone on the younger end too as well. The A's also are developing starters in their farm system that I think can make an impact too as well. Notice I didn't mention a guy like Jamie Arnold that I do think is going to ascend through the organization rather quickly. And there are other prospects on their way too as well. So you don't want to empty the farm, but nevertheless, someone like a Luis Morales might solve the Yankees' problems for the present and the long term too as well. They do have the infield flexibility. I'm sure the A's probably like I said, I don't think they'd have to give up that many prospects. It wouldn't have to be all three. Now that I have to rethink on it, it would probably be a gauge jump of Luis Morales and probably a Dow Hernandez or a Max Muncy type. Someone that could add infield depth to the Yankees in return, basically. So I think that's how it would align. Again, this is all hypotheticals. We're all spitting out ideas, getting creative here, right? Because everything that we've been hearing has been very limited in terms of what the A's have been linked to. So we want to just envision different pathways of how could the A's build themselves for this year coming up and for the years to come. I think this is a move that makes them better. But again, have an asterisk next to it as long as you get increase your activity in the pitching market. Because without that, then this move will hinder you within the next couple of years or so when you're really struggling for that pitching depth. So if you can't get that pitching depth, no deal here. But in terms of potential trade targets, to me, this would be the top choice in bringing in a Jazz Chisholm, someone of that ilk coming off a 30-30 season, I think would fit in well with this A's team. And you would be getting a little bit more of that contact rate. The strikeout rate, it can fluctuate at times, but he showed more of a willingness of putting the ball in play with two strikes more last year, it felt like, which led to his rise, I feel like, in 2025. All right, let's move across the diamond. Let's go to third base. So these are the best remaining free agent options. We got, actually, before I move along, in terms of the free agent groups for the second baseman, I think the best remaining guy, if you're not going to go the trade route, would be Luis Rengifo, because he is someone that can play second and third. He's coming off a season where I believe he played the most games of his career in a single year, because I do know his injury history has been with him for the majority of his time with the Angels. But nevertheless, he's someone that's familiar with the American League West, and I feel like he is someone that is a true professional. He's going to give you a quality at bat, and I think he's toolsy. And I think having someone like that would be an upgrade as well, adding that infield depth. And absolutely, I think on this club would most likely be win the everyday starting third baseman job. I think that's where he is truly best. But again, he is more than serviceable over at second base. He can play outfield at a pinch. I think Rengifo just gives you different options, different lineup looks as compared to some of the other free agent options that do remain. So if I had a choice, and if the A's were going to go sign one of these guys remaining out of this free agent group, I would go with Rengifo. All right, now, sorry for jumping ahead. Now let's talk about third base, because the A's have been noted as saying that they want to upgrade one of second or third base. So we went over second base. Those are the options that are remaining after the flurry of deals that have been done. Gave our thoughts. Now we're going to do the same thing at third. So here are the best remaining free agents available: Alex Bregman, Eugenio Suarez, Paul DeJong, Yon Moncada, Kike Hernandez, and Andy Ibanez, as well as a couple of international free agents, Muntaka Murakami and Sungmun Song. So out of the free agent groups, we'll start there this time. I think there are a couple of options here that I do like. One is completely unrealistic, and one is borderline at best. I would love Alex Bregman, but I think his market is going to outprice what the A's are going to be willing to provide. If I had to guess, I think Bregman's going to go back to Boston. So we're not going to spend much time talking about him. It would be a great fit, but I don't feel like that's going to happen. Now, someone that I feel like could potentially be a landing spot, because again, I think if the A's want to mean serious business, they're going to have to hand out some cash. And I think they're going to have to blow this free agent out of the water with an offer. And the A's, I feel like, do have the capability to do so. And I think in this spot, my best free agent option would be Eugenio Suarez. He had 49 home runs. I know his time was split between Arizona and going back to Seattle. Can you imagine what he would do at Sutter Health Park? And the defense is slightly above average at best, but it's nothing that's going to hinder you. And you're going to have an established veteran, an everyday third baseman that you know is going to provide significant slug in the middle of that order. The only thing that does alarm me is the high strikeout percentage. So that kind of goes against the theme of where we want this team to move forward. However, if there is a collective effort to cut down on that you can survive someone like Suarez having a little bit more of an increased strikeout percentage because of the high value of power output and slug in the middle of an order, especially with runners in scoring position. He seems to come through more times than not. This would provide stability in the middle of the order that you already do have, but it just lengthens the lineup. And you have someone that holds his own more than enough at third base that you improve defensively just having someone like a Suarez. I know he's valued at probably getting something like 3 years, $75 million. Maybe you bump up the value a little bit. Maybe you give him an extra year, include a player option. You got to get creative here. Maybe you go 4 years, $105 million. Really wow him, because just based on what your reputation is now in terms of the A's and the baseball world scope, there isn't a lot of trust there. And with them calling Sutter Health Park home, at least for the next 2 seasons, free agents don't really want to go there. They feel like that they're not going to get the full major league experience. They're not going to have access at a facility that they need to withstand the rigors of a 162-game schedule as compared to all the other parks in the league. So there are some factors that are hindering the A's that are out of their control at the moment. And you got to think that their pitch it is temporary. It is still a professional grade facility. And by 2028, they are going to be playing in a brand new $2 billion ballpark in Las Vegas, which is a destination city. So that's kind of going to be part of their pitch. And I know it's an uphill battle, and you're seeing it in small examples where Marte puts the A's on a no trade list. I'm sure there's other guys that have added the A's to their list too as well. That's just what their reputation is right now. So I think a way to supplement that and improve that reputation is you got to show you mean business and fork out some dough. At the end of the day, money talks. And I think if the A's have the opportunity to bring in a guy like Suarez, he would immediately improve this offense even more. You're going to see just power after power coming up to the plate. And I feel like someone with his veteran experience will also have a positive impact to this young core around him. Someone that's been through the rigors. Someone that's just coming off a postseason run with the Mariners, by the way. So I think all of this would be quite valuable. Again, I feel like I don't know how far into the deep end the A's are willing to go financially here. But if you're going to bring in a high-impact free agent like this, I don't think this is part of their plans. I'm saying if they are, then they're going to really have to open up their wallet, because that's what's going to have to separate them from some of these other clubs that might have more of the typical expectations of signing on with a new professional club. So that's our thoughts there with free agents. Now, best trade option. Now, this is something that I think could be a little bit more realistic. And again, what would the outcome of the trade be? I don't know. We don't know, because with how this player has been trending, it certainly would be a far cry from who he once was offensively, but you would get still a significant upgrade defensively at third base. I think the A's could line up with the St. Louis Cardinals as a trade partner for Nolan Arenado. Now, I know Nolan Arenado, he's fallen from who he was over the last 2-3 years. It's been a steady decline offensively. He's battled some injury, but here's why. Here's why I like this. Yes, you're going to take on the remainder of some of his financials, but you can work that into the deal that St. Louis has to contribute some of the remaining portion of his significant AAV over the next 2 years, I believe. And I think in this move, because the Cardinals are looking to transition into more of a rebuild, they're not going to be necessarily vying for major league ready players. They're going to be more than happy with getting some prospects to rebuild their farm system and get into development mode so that they can have a foundation in place where the Cardinals will be back to being competitive potentially in the next 2, 3, 4 years. So I don't think the Cardinals are in any hurry, and they would love unloading someone like Arenado, especially if they're not in a win-now mode. And I feel like if this deal, the Cardinals don't take any of the financials on, I think it would fall through. So something like a 50-50 split there would be good. And I don't think the A's would have to give up a whole lot here. I think 2-3 prospects would get it done. Probably a 3-prospect package, but maybe one higher end, the rest of the 2 lower on their top prospect rankings. I think this is something that could get done. I think this is the lowest Arenado's value has been. And I think sometimes you can get reinvigorated, even though I think he would be entering age 35 season. Sometimes you do have that last gas for one solid year. You're in a new place, a new environment, and you want to prove the doubters that you still have it. Because at his peak, at his prime, he was an annual Gold Glove Award winner, and he was a perennial all-star hitting with power to all fields, being the complete player without a doubt. Now, being more advanced in his age, I like this because there's only 2 years left on his deal, so that even if it doesn't necessarily work out as you can hope, his glove is going to age well. He is still a defensive stalwart over there and will be an upgrade over what you would put out there for 2026. No offense to Hernandez or Muncy, but Arenado's just been around the block for quite a long time. And he showed what he could do with that glove. And I think with the A's wanting to get more of a theme and a foundation of having more of a defensive principle, who better to learn from than Arenado, a former Platinum Gold Glove Award winner. So having that in the room, I think, would improve the defense all across the board. That kind of stuff can be contagious. So for those reasons, I would love a move like this. I don't think there's going to necessarily even be a ton of teams in on this market as they were last year. So we'll have to monitor that. I really wouldn't be surprised here if the A's get a deal done here. I believe they lined up as trade partners in the past, so there are good relations there. Let's see what can happen. But again, these are all hypotheticals. I think this is something that could have a positive outcome. But hey, if he truly is at the end of his career, then, at least you go down swinging, taking a chance and bringing in someone that has an extensive professional baseball resume. And I think going to a park like Sutter Health Park and see a return to some of those offensive numbers. I don't think what he once was with the Rockies or even the start of his Cardinals career. But I think somewhere in the middle of that, I still think is in the tank if he is in a home like Sutter Health. So we'll have to monitor and see if anything like that comes to fruition. All right, let's head out to the bullpen. Let's talk about the best remaining free agents there. So the best remaining arms, again, a lot of guys have been signed. So want to know what the A's are doing, what plans they have for the remainder of this offseason. But Sean Armstrong, Kirby Yates, Pete Fairbanks, David Robertson, Sean Newcomb, Jakob Eunice, Luke Weaver, Hunter Harvey, Caleb Ferguson, Brad Keller, Andrew Chafin, Hector Neris. Those are the names that jumped off the page. There were other guys I just didn't think were going to factor into this discussion. We're going to just stick with best free agent options here because it's really hard to gauge relief pitcher trades unless it's one of your top-end closers. But the only guy that's really been rumored on being out there in the trade market that I've heard is Mason Miller. But obviously, A's traded him to San Diego, so I don't think there would be a trade back. That would make sense. I've heard that Miller and the Padres and the Mets have been involved in talks where Miller may end up being the future closer in Queens. We'll have to see about that. But again, not going to matter on this platform here. Out of those best free agent options, I would love for them to sign 3 guys. Pete Fairbanks, Sean Newcomb, and Hunter Harvey. 2 of those guys have closing experience, and Newcomb had a sub-2 ERA and 36 appearances for you last year. And you bring in that left-handed specialist. I think that's very important. Someone that got consistent outs, I think, was very well received over the second half of last season, and I think would slot in well into a middle relief role in terms of Newcomb. Fairbanks, this would be the dream signing here. You're bringing in arguably the best, I'd say, no, not arguably, he is the best closer remaining on the open market now. And he's been one of the most consistent starters over the last 3 seasons, assembling over 60 saves over that time. And someone that's been relatively healthy. I know he's battled through some minor injuries, but all in all, he has been someone that you can consistently count on. And while his market value is probably increasing due to the limited availability remaining for closer services on the market, he's not going to be in rush to get a deal done. Again, I think you're going to have to wow out someone like that to learn from these other suitors that I think are really going to be vying hard for him to be their closer or setup man, depending on what team he would end up with. But there are definitely going to be a lot of teams interested. The A's are going to have to do something to stand out. And with the nature of where they are at as a franchise right now, it's going to have to be talking with the financials. All right. And then before we move on to our next topic of discussion, we're going to talk about the best starting pitchers remaining. And then we'll talk about, again, our best starting pitcher thoughts. We believe first we'll start trade and then free agency. So these are the best starting pitchers available. Again, there's more than this, but after a certain point, we kind of cut the list based on guys that we just didn't feel like were going to be a fit or a factor in this discussion. But Ranger Suarez, Framber Valdez, Nick Martinez, Chris Bassett, Zach Gallen, Zach Littell, Justin Verlander, Nestor Cortez, Miles Mikolas, Lucas Giolito, Andrew Heaney, Marcus Stroman, Max Scherzer, Tatsuya Imai. So let's start with trade options. I think there are 2 teams that I'm sure the A's have had discussions with already, but need to advance them as we get closer and closer to the season. That would be with the Cincinnati Reds and the Miami Marlins. Both of those teams have a plethora of arm talent, and those are both teams that are looking to improve their offensive firepower. The A's have outfield depth that I feel they are more than willing to part ways with if they can increase their starting pitching or pitching depth as a whole, but especially starting pitching depth. So I think they would line up well at Cincinnati. It would take quite a bit to land a package for someone like a Hunter Green, but I think trading for someone like an Andrew Abbott or even a Brady Singer is something that you can't rule out too as well, that would slot in very well to the A's rotation. You go to South Beach now with the Marlins. Would be great to be able to swing a trade for someone like a Yuri Perez or an Edward Cabrera, 2 guys that are under team contract control, but still have a ton of potential that they haven't even consistently reached yet and are on the right side of 30. They're both still in their 20s. So I think those would be 2 controllable arms that you can continue to develop, and I think would make an instant impact even in 2026. Especially Yuri Perez, I really like the way he keeps the ball on the ground, has electric stuff. Cabrera does have the command issues a little bit, but all in all, really took some huge step forward in 2025 based on the career trajectory that he had leading up to that. But I think inquiring with one of those 2 teams would be the best avenue to go if you are looking to add starting pitching depth via the trade. Now, with the remaining free agent class, there was 3 guys I was going between. I was mentioning, I think a Zach Littell would be good. I think he would slot in as the A's 2 or 3. Reliable innings eater, someone that doesn't walk a lot of batters and is just going to attack and give you a chance to win every 5th day. So I would love for them to pick up the phone and entertain a visit or for Zoom, however they're conducting them these days. Get them in the building, tell them what their plan is. And I think Littell is someone that could be here for this year and for the years to come and be a consistent presence in a major league starting rotation. It would significantly improve the A's rotation for this year immediately. Also thought about briefly Zach Gallen, but then he can be susceptible to the home run ball a bit, and I think that wouldn't play well in Sutter Health Park. Which left me to the biggest fish available. If you were going to put your chips in financially all into one big piece, it would be right here. I do know there are some big guys that were taken off the board, but I think with this guy's track record in the National League with the Phillies, with what he's done every 5th day in a hitter-friendly park, and especially with the sub-3 ERA and a ton of postseason experience, he would slot in right at the top of your rotation with the A's, and I feel like you know exactly what you're going to get. And he is someone that does a good job of changing speeds, changing pace, that he isn't going to be beat consistently by the home run ball, that he is someone that can keep the ball on the ground. and he's someone that I feel like is reliable, would slot in as this team's ace, to be completely honest. Severino would have to, take a step down to 2, which I think may be more suitable for him, and Springs in the 3. And then you have Morales and Lopez. All of a sudden, your rotation's really taking shape and forming an identity that I think could have you playing some meaningful baseball in September and October. But I would say make that big free agent splash with Ranger Suarez. Haven't heard any rumors of them linked to Suarez aside from that one article from Jeff Passan, again, which was his list of hypotheticals of where teams can make that big splash. I'm with him. It would make a lot of sense. Financials are going to talk, but really share the vision of where this team is at right now and where they're going to be by year 3 of his contract, because he is someone that's probably going to garner a 6-7 year deal. And I know that's a lot to give a pitcher, but that is the nature of the market now. And especially as the options are dwindling from the market of who you can go get, it's going to make some of these guys' value increase that much. That's just the nature of the beast. And with a team that doesn't have a ton invested on the current roster, got to make a splash somewhere. I know they said David Force has been quoted as saying that they're looking for a middle of the rotation type arm. That's not good enough. It's not. Unless they've had conversations with these free agent camps and it's clear that they're miles apart or there's absolutely zero interest. If that's the case, okay, then that's the way you pivot to a middle of the rotation arm. But don't set the ceiling there. Shoot for the stars. Use the financials that you do have access to. Don't you want to make this team better in 2026? What held this team back in 2026? Pitching, defense, and pitching. You have an opportunity here over these next few weeks to make or break what this 2026 team, what chances they're going to have in the American League West and getting into the AL postseason picture. Offensively, they can hit with the best of them in the league. No concerns there. Would love for them to make an upgrade or two there, but if they don't, with what they have right now, they could definitely compete with anyone. No worries there. But pitching, I have a lot of questions about the bullpen still. No closer with experience yet, as promised. Or no reliever with closing experience, as promised. No starting pitching depth. They've added minor league organizational depth, but that's it. And I know there's still time. I know deals get done, especially sometimes even closer leading up to spring training. That would be tough for us to have to wait that long. But someone like a Fairbanks may take a while because he's in no rush. Because he's going to see how high he can get his market now that guys like Diaz and Suarez are off the board. And Jansen, all these big players are off the board. And Fairbanks is a big player of his own too as well. So now he's just going to sit there and shows him the most love, basically. I think the A's have an opportunity to make something really look good for a 2-year plan with a 3rd-year option for Fairbanks. That could really make him consider. If anyone is understanding, too, of a team going through temporary facility changes and upgrades, with them moving from Oakland to Sacramento and can be on their way to a new stadium in Vegas, it's Fairbanks. He pitched in a minor league stadium last year with the Rays. Maybe you could say on one end he could be over and done with and hate it. But maybe on the other hand, he's someone that just loves this game, doesn't care, just wants the ball and wants to get that 27th out, notch that save, and be part of a winning culture. That could be his focus, and that's what could give the A's an inside path as part of their pitch to land someone like a Fairbanks. Hey, you experienced this past season. You had one of your best years closing. So if you could do it there, you could do it here. And there's every opportunity that this A's team is ascending into that playoff pathway. Is it going to happen in 2026? Depends on what they do the remainder of this offseason and how much regression they have to deal with as an offense and how this team performs getting out of the gate. If they can avoid that one big swoon, they'll have every chance. But we'll see, and we'll have more of a discussion on that later. But for the remainder of the offseason, if they don't do anything else, bring in a closer. Because again, and just keep adding to that bullpen. If I had to pick one area of need out of these three in terms of top priority, would I love a starting pitcher? Yes, absolutely, they need it. But if they rolled out with a rotation of Severino, Springs, Lopez, Morales, then you have a competition for that fifth spot between a JT Ginn, a Jack Perkins, maybe even a Gage jump depending how spring training goes. You still like your options there. There's a room for improvement for sure, and you're really banking on a bounce back from Severino too as well in that equation. That if all that happens, the starting pitcher could be fine with that rotation. That's barring any medical issues too as well. Offensively, I rattle on about it, that they were top 10 in a ton of categories across the board. So I would say that's the least area of need for in terms of needing improvement. But the bullpen, you saw how bad it was at times, and I love the effort that they brought together in that second half and ended up being the second best bullpen in all of baseball. But that's good in small dosages, but that's not going to help you be successful at the end of the long marathon. It's a marathon and a sprint. So there's a smaller sample size that you wonder, would they be able to keep that up? There's probably another 100 games from there. I don't know. I'd like to say so, but percentages would say probably not. So focus on the bullpen and flex your financials if you have to. Again, you don't have a ton invested in this team as compared to other rosters in Major League Baseball. I do know there's a lot of rumblings on what's going on with the A's financials and the worries of them being able to provide for the construction of the stadium in Vegas, and with them having less in terms of box office sales due to playing in a minor league park. I understand they're a little strapped in some areas, but from all these years that they've saved on not dishing out these major contracts or getting this shared revenue amount every year, they have access to financials. And I'm not saying they have to go crazy and get a $200 million payroll, but would it really be terrible if we saw them get to the $80, $90 million range? God forbid 100? Wouldn't kill them. And if you feel the team good enough that makes it into the postseason, that's more revenue if you want to look at it from the financial side of things. That's more games, it's more ticket sales, it's more TV revenue, all that stuff. More merchandise, everything business continues until you are eliminated. So if you want to be a motivator and see, hey, this team isn't as far off as you think, if you want to be selfish and looking for a financial scope, bringing in good players can help you make more money in the long term. And if you're thinking about Vegas, if you have a team that's winning now over here and have that positive momentum, you're going to have more people interested over there in watching the A's team as compared to if they keep kind of middling with where they're at. And they've been ascending. But I'm saying if over these next 2 years they continue to win 70-something games, you're not going to have a fan base that's as excited as compared to if you have a team, this year they were a wild card, 2027 they won the division, something like that. So if you want to look at it from all of those angles, this is a very important offseason. I know you'll have another important one next year, but there are opportunities to bring in players to make you a better team in 2026. Get to work. All right. That's all I have on that topic. After we thank one of our partners, we're going to thank the Holiday Inn in downtown Sacramento for them hosting us during one of our content trips, covering the A's and some hot spots around Sacramento earlier this year. So we want to continue to show them some support and why they should be the destination to stay during your next visit to the capital city in Sacramento. So we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this ad read. Back after this. Stay at our downtown Sacramento hotel. Stay, work, and play at Holiday Inn Sacramento Downtown Arena near the shopping, dining, and entertainment of the historic Old Town Sacramento waterfront. A 15-minute drive from Sacramento International Airport, our downtown hotel is a few blocks from the Golden One Center and downtown Commons and a short walk from the California State Capitol and Safe Credit Union Convention Center. Host meetings and events in our boardrooms and ballrooms. Work out in our fitness center and take a dip in our rooftop pool, enjoy breakfast at Cypress Grill, or gather with friends and colleagues for dinner and drinks. Unwind in our comfortable rooms and suites with amenities and cityscape views. We are the ideal choice for your Sacramento adventure. All right, now we talk about the importance of plate discipline. And what am I talking about here? I'm talking about the ability to draw walks, limit chasing pitches out of the zone, cutting down on strikeouts by being competitive with 2 strikes, things like that. So for the A's, this was an area. Now, we're going to be focusing here on their offense as a whole. So like I mentioned, they were one of the best offenses in baseball. They had a top 5 batting average. They were top 10 in home runs and I believe top 12 in runs scored. There was a lot to like. OPS, they were top 10, slug, all of that good stuff. There was a lot of productivity coming out of this lineup. When you dive deeper into the numbers, I think one area that this team could improve upon is their plate discipline. And besides even looking to the numbers, that we're going to take a look at a few here real quick. But I think the eye test, you kind of saw it at times. When this team was going really well and building leads and winning more games, it seems like the lineup was in unison and connecting at bats, passing the baton to the next guy. It was guys that were willing to take that walk, make the pitcher work a little bit harder than as compared to giving into something that's not your pitch early in the zone. And I think when you saw that at times, you saw them beating pitchers like a Valdez and a Skubal. So you saw the not even the full ceiling, but you saw the peak of this team's powers, that they were even productive against some of the game's best. They even knocked around Hunter Brown a couple times this year, and it was just playing that waiting game, not giving into his pitch, not chasing, sticking to a consistent plan, and it is absolutely contagious. And then on the other side of the coin, when things start getting really bad, and you started seeing this at that end of May, early June swoon, where they lost 20 of 21 games, you start seeing guys press a little bit, trying to end this losing streak themselves, starting to try to put it all on their shoulders and think the only way out of this is through me. And when you have me, that's when you see deterioration of overall team performance. And I think you saw that on display. The strikeout percentage increased during that time. Guys were drawing a lot less walks. And when you saw that, there's a lot less offensive opportunities. And the frustrating part during that stretch, a lot of those games that they lost, they weren't getting blown out. The majority of them were being lost by 1 to 3 runs, which has got to be really tough to swallow in that room, especially when you feel like you have an opportunity to do some bigger things and to have one stretch keep you from the whole prism of the whole season, where you played pretty good baseball for 3/4 of the year, that one stretch is what really cost you at the end of the day. But I do think these are things that you do see from a younger lineup. And I believe the A's have the 3rd youngest lineup in all of baseball. That you are going to see guys that get antsy at times, whether it's they're feeling good at the plate and maybe they'll give into a pitch earlier in the count that they should because they get a little swing happy. And then sometimes, on the other hand, when you feel like you're never going to stop struggling, you start trying to force it. You start swinging at pitches that you ordinarily wouldn't or shouldn't. It's the art of discipline. That's what it is. And I think it really takes a collective effort, starting with your own individual approach and then having it contagious team-wide and having those conversations in between at-bats, which I think the A's do, and I feel like a lot of professional hitters do. But I think there's a lot you can learn on a day-to-day basis. And I think with how good the A's offense was in 2025, this is an area, if they hone on this as a theme heading into next season, that what the potential of what this offense can do, I think starts getting really scary. And let's mention how they did perform in 2025. So they had a 22.9 K percentage, which was the 11th highest in baseball. And it had an 8.2 walk percentage, which was the 10th lowest in baseball. And they had the 4th lowest contact percentage of baseball. So those are 3 numbers that don't quite add up to a winning formula. And that might be the difference or making and breaking, flipping 10 games, let's just say. I don't have the amount of 1 to 3 run games that the A's played in this year. But I can tell you that they played it enough that they could have flipped 8 to 10 of them if they had a little bit more of an approach. Now, I do know some of those instances the pitching depth let them down too as well, but there were definitely situations where I feel like some guys gave away at-bats and took away some opportunities to maybe flip the script in that game and maybe flip the script on that whole streak as a whole. Because sometimes you just need to see one or two go through and the whole outcome and the whole picture can look completely different. But based on those numbers, these are areas they need to see growth in. And I know that in today's game, the strikeout necessarily isn't as disregarded as it once was, but league average is 19%. So if I feel like as a collective whole you're above that, that's something that's got to change. Who is the best team in baseball with contact percentage or strikeout percentage? Toronto Blue Jays, of course. Look where they ended up. I know that's not all end all be all, but putting the ball in play at a more consistent clip is going to give your team an opportunity to have more chances to put pressure on the other team and get some traffic going on the base paths. If you're striking out, that's a waste of that bat. There's no pressure on the opposing team, and the play is over just like that. And that's one less out that you have to either extend the lead or cut into a deficit. So if you can cut down those strikeouts, that is something that can lead to more productivity as an offense. Let's take two hitters, for example, and we'll look at this more on an individual basis. We'll take an A's player who struggled in these categories, and then a hitter on another team in baseball with a similar amount of plate appearances that excelled to show differing levels of productivity and what it can mean to your overall productivity to your team. So Lawrence Butler, we'll start with the guy that struggled this year. I think he'll be the first to tell you. He played in 152 games. He had 630 plate appearances, batted .234, 21 home runs, 63 runs batted in, a .710 OPS, and 22 stolen bases. His strikeout percentage now, remember I said for hitters, it's right around 19 to 20% on average. His was 28.4%. That's nearly a third of his appearances ending via the strikeout. Or at-bats, excuse me. That's nearly a third of his at-bats that nothing good came out of it. Even if you're fighting with two strikes, and maybe there's a runner on second base, less than 2 outs, pull the ball on the ground with 2 strikes, move that runner to the third, even though it's 2 outs, that's another opportunity. The runner moves 90 feet. What if there's a wild pitch? Now that runner can score from third. Even the base hit. All you got to do is get a base hit through. I know it's easier said than done with 2 outs. But if you just get a routine base hit to shallow outfield, now that runner's definitely going to score as compared if you have the guy trying to score from second, that might be a bang-bang play at the plate. So it's little things like that I feel like if you could be more competitive with 2 strikes and cut down on your strikeout rate, you're going to be an overall more productive player for your team. The walk rate, it's average, 9.4%. I think that's something, you start to see more of an elite level in the 12% range and higher, I believe. But that can improve with better pitch selection and not falling into the guessing game trap. And again, this was all eye test in terms of for Butler. That's why I chose him. Because I remember seeing it at times, even at games that we went to in person, that there would be times with 2 strikes, he would let a fastball go right by him in a very hittable location. And it was very clear that he was sitting off speed because you could tell his timing was set to being able to drive an off-speed pitch. His front foot got down a little bit later. And even the way that he took it, just the body, it just didn't compute, which means it seemed like he was caught in between. He was caught guessing the pitch. And when you get to that point, and I do know there are hitters that have made a living off guessing pitches, but everyone is different. I feel like your typical hitter does a much better job having a consistent approach in counts and reacting to what the opposing pitcher is going to be providing you on that specific day. And I think Butler here, what he needs to do is come up with that consistent approach so that even if there is a battle to 2 strikes, which there is, every hitter is going to hit with 2 strikes. I mean, if that's not the case, that would be unreal. That's never happened. if you're hitting with 2 strikes, Butler should be in a situation he knows what he has to do in the defensive. And what he should do is have a willingness to consistently drive the ball with authority to the opposite field, to left field, since he is a left-handed hitter. But having that willingness, and you saw it at times, and that's when you saw the uptick in his extra base hits with those opposite field doubles, even hitting a couple backside home runs. He's got that in him. I know he's shown the willingness to want to do that, but I think it just needs to be more consistent. So at the end, I think the steps to creating that approach are already in place, but now we just got to get to more consistent execution. And if he stays along that path, I think you're going to see a much better Butler in 2026. But it seems like for him, for his game, that it's either get something to attack early in the count. In fact, he actually he batted .280 on swinging at the first pitch this year, which was significantly higher than his overall batting average. So it seems like if he's in a situation where he just gets to see and react, sometimes the first pitch is the best pitch you're going to see. Now, I'm not saying he should do that in every at-bat, but if it's in the range of what he sees is in his hitting power zone, go for it. Because that seems like to be his best approach at the moment. And then with 2 strikes, have that willingness to go to opposite field. Shorten up a little bit of the swing. You don't always have to get off your A swing, and have that mental relaxation set in with all that preparation and mental approach in place. Just see and react and let your ability take over. He needs to slow down a little bit. Sometimes it seems like his at-bats speed up on him a little bit. So I'm looking forward to seeing, now that he's traversed through a full season of struggle like this, how is he going to respond in 2026? I do think you'll see some of these areas of growth. Would love to see, even if Butler can get this down to 21%, if he can get his walk percentage to 10.5, not asking a ton more. He struck out, 178 times this year? I'm probably talking about him striking out 124 instead, which still isn't great, but that gives you 50 more opportunities to be productive for your team. And in those 50 opportunities, you're probably going to have opportunities that lead to more walks. So you're going to see an increase in that walk percentage. He had a .302 BABIP. So that's the thing, too. If he puts the ball in play, he's strong enough that it's probably going to be more hard contact than not. If you give yourself more opportunities, you're going to see your average increase from there, too, as well. More opportunities in play. If you're someone that does consistently hit the ball with higher exit velo, you're going to find more holes, unless you're just an unlucky hitter. But in this case, this shows me that he is someone, if he puts the ball in play, it's more times or pretty consistently going to find some green grass. For him to bat .234 but have a .302 BABIP, that's what that story tells me right there. Now, let's take a case study, compare it side by side here, and talk about someone on another major league team that does much better in the K to walk percentage ratio and what his outlook looks like. So also after this, Butler's WAR was 3.7, I believe. Now we're going to take a look at the 2025 season for Kansas City Royals third baseman Ketel Garcia. He played 160 games, and the reason why we selected him is because he had 666 plate appearances. So only 30 more plate appearances than Butler, so right in the same ballpark. He batted .286, 16 home runs, 81 RBIs, at 800 OPS, and 23 stolen bases. And also his overall profile in terms of statistics really line up with the type of player that Butler is, although, Garcia is an infielder. He can play multiple spots. Butler's an outfielder, but in terms of offensive profile, I feel like these guys line up pretty similarly. Garcia in the year, he had a 12.6 K percentage, an 8.5 walk percentage, and a .307 BABIP, and a 5.6 WAR. You could just hear it. On paper, you can see it. And I'm sure, Royals fans, you know your team best. Didn't watch a ton of Kansas City Royals games in 2025, but I could only imagine that Ketel Garcia was significantly more productive based on him cutting down the strikeouts, being able to put the ball in play more effectively with 2 strikes, and having that willingness to draw the walk. 8.5, that's even a little less than what Butler did, but you can see there's a lot more balance, that there is more of an approach, that walk rate is pretty close to the strikeout rate, so there's not too much of a gap there. And to me, that creates a lot more consistency as a hitter. He's adding significant value to his team's pathway to victory. Congrats to Garcia. He just signed a 5-year extension to stay in Kansas City, well earned there. But having a player like this is going to continue to create that momentum in the lineup and add stress to the opposing pitcher too as well. That if you even add an inch of doubt into their mind, you put the ball in play with 2 strikes on their strikeout pitch, they may not feel like they have their best stuff that day, and that could lead to some mental mind games going in your favor. That's baseball. That just happens sometimes. Having that increase in offensive chances is going to help you potentially be on the right side of those games decided by 1 to 3 runs. It's the little things. And that's where you saw teams like Toronto, LA. You even saw Seattle later on in the year really honing on these factors. Notice I'm mentioning playoff teams. They pass the baton to the next player. They fight with 2 strikes. They grind it out backs. They take their walks, and then they go for that slug kill shot when they've generated traffic and have pressure on the opposing team. There's a method to the madness there. So at the end of the day, just want to see Butler's growth here. And I feel like Butler is just the prime example of needing to improve in terms of his overall plate discipline, especially if he is someone that the A's project to be a leadoff hitter someday. Don't think he could do that in 2026, but he does fit all the requirements of what a prototypical leadoff hitter would provide. He gives you a little bit. He gives speed, power. When he's going right, hard contact too as well. But he's got to get a little bit more consistent cutting down those strikeouts, because I think striking out nearly 200 times is just not going to get it done. It's going to set a negative theme and connotation for your overall offense. So, to me, if Butler isn't really necessarily able to resolve these plate discipline issues over the next year, this could be something that is a continued work in progress. You can have someone like a Jacob Wilson that has a higher contact rate. Now, I know his walk percentage is rather low, but he's not going to strike out a ton. At least he's going to generate that early traffic. He is someone that gets a ton of base hits, not necessarily a big stolen base threat. But that's someone I feel like that would be more productive in that spot, giving your team more offensive chances than Butler would at this point. So that's something that will continue to track. But there's other guys in this team too as well that need improvement in this area. With, how great Nick Kurtz was in his first year, he had a 30+ K percentage. That's something that's got to be cut down significantly. That's well above league average. And I know he was highly productive despite that, but that's something where in year 2 there is some potential regression. You don't want to see that K percentage continue to increase, especially now that there's more film on him. Pitchers are going to attack him in different ways. This game is a game of adjustments, and I'm sure Kurtz will be more than ready for the task at hand. But that's something I'd love to monitor for him, being at 30.9% with his K rate. Tyler Soderstrom was at 22.6 and Brent Rooker at 22.2. Again, I know these are middle-of-the-order type bats, but if we want to have more of a team-wide theme and willingness to cut down on the strikeouts, it's going to take everyone involved. If we can get those guys closer to 20, if we can get Kurtz, even I know it would be a lot to jump, but even if we get him down from 30.9 to 24, 25% range, that would be a significant improvement. And there's no reason why guys like Soderstrom, who does have a very strong desire and willingness to go to the opposite field, where he can end up in the 19% range. And Brent Rooker, I could see he's someone that has a higher walk percentage, but he's someone that can get close to that 20% as well. I do know they provide the slugging pop in this team, but again, I think having more of that concerted effort to focus on plate discipline is where this team can take that next step. And with that, that brings us to the close of another edition of A's Day. We appreciate you spending part of your Tuesday or whenever you're listening to our newest episode discussing everything athletics. On today's show, we talked about Ketel Marte listing 5 teams that he will not accept a trade to, and the A's unfortunately ended up on that list. We pivoted from there and discussed what options the A's have remaining, where do they go from here to navigate the remainder of this offseason to improve the club for 2026. And then we wrapped up discussing the art of plate discipline, viewed a couple of case studies of someone that struggled in this department as compared to someone that excelled, what that can mean to overall team dynamics and success in 2026 and beyond. We'll be back behind the mic for Friday's show. we'll discuss any transactions that the A's complete between now and Friday. Again, all the rumors have been quiet, but nevertheless, according to Forrest, he did say that discussions have been had, and shortly thereafter, they did bring in Mark Leiter Jr., so hopefully we have maybe a bullpen reinforcement to talk about on Friday, maybe a new second baseman or third baseman. Time will tell. And then we'll continue on with this player in A's history, taking it back to the 1960s. And we'll see what other topics of discussions we feel like talking about on Friday. We're getting to that point of the offseason where there isn't necessarily a ton to talk about from the athletic scope, but we are going to do our part to keep everyone excited as if you are listening to this today, Tuesday, December 16th, we are officially 100 days away from opening day, so A's baseball is a lot closer around the corner than you may expect. That's all I have for you today. Once again, I'm your host, Joe Grado. I hope you all have a great Tuesday. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll be back once again on Friday to kick off your weekend talking about the A's. Thank you. Take care, everyone. We'll see you all again real soon. Holy Toledo, let's go A's.